Welcome to Widowed Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole. Today we are doing another one of our special mini series, which will eventually be its own podcast, Out of the Fog and Into the Light, Rebuilding Your Life When Everything Changes. And I am loving, I've just interviewed, I think it's my second person maybe for this new podcast. And I found someone on Podmatch, and everything that she does looks like it fits perfectly with Rebuilding Your Life. And I'm excited to get to know her today. So how are you today? This is Dawn Stevens. How are you?
Hi, Michelle. I'm great. Good to
Good. Where
be
are you
here.
coming from? Where do you
Uh,
live?
I live in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay. I'm in Vancouver, Washington. So we're very
Okay,
far.
very far.
3 hours apart, very far. But that's the beauty of technology. I mean, I'm so grateful. I think about it all the time, like how technology allows us to meet people across the world. I've done podcasts in Africa and all over, and it's just been this amazing thing. So I love that we're here. I mean, I've just been reflecting a lot lately about podcasting, and I'm like, I love this. Like, I get to sit here and meet people across the world and hear what they do, and it's fun. So I'm excited to be here. So with this new podcast, we're going to be going into like some of your story and what you've been through, which honestly I don't even know all of it, just kind of like about your life. And then we'll go into like your books and tips for rebuilding life and all of that. So let's just start in your story, literally wherever you want to start, because we all have a story. We've all been
Okay.
through things. So anything you want
So,
to share.
all right. Well, Michelle, I'm going to start by telling you a story
Yes,
about a little pot.
cute.
And
Cute.
those of you that are watching can see the little pot.
It's so cute.
But
Pause for a second. I'm an elementary teacher, well, before this, so I love all this.
so this is Little Pot. It is a vessel created by a potter, and he wants to know why the potter made me. So, like me, he is very excited to serve his creator. And the first thing the potter does is he puts papers inside Little Pot. And Little Pot feels very smart. So he thinks his purpose is to be a smart paper pot.
Mm,
But the potter makes another vessel that is bigger and stronger than Little Pot, takes his papers away and puts them in that vessel. And Little Pot is now empty and unfulfilled, no purpose.
mm,
So the potter comes along. It's okay because the next thing the potter does is fill it with coins. Now Little Pot feels rich. It believes that it is a rich coin pot. We all want to be coin pots, right? We know the coins belong to the potter, but gosh, it feels good to hold them.
yeah.
But then the potter makes this pig shaped vessel and begins to put coins in that one and takes Little Pot's coins away from him and puts them in that piggy bank. And Little Pot is empty again. To make matters even worse, the potter now fills Little Pot with dirt.
Mm,
It does not want to be a dirt pot, but it believes in the potter and it trusts him. And so the potter plants something inside of it and it begins to grow. And it thinks, oh, I'm going to be a flower pot. My purpose is to be beautiful. I'm going to worship the potter. I'm going to look good. And he does. He grows these tiny little white and yellow flowers. And he's feeling very beautiful until he wakes up one day and his flowers have turned hard and green.
mm.
And he looks at the potter and he is very concerned. And the potter says, Little pot, you're not a paper pot. You're not a coin pot. You're not a flower pot. Little Pot's flowers were turning to strawberries because what Little Pot truly is a fruit pot. So,
Cute.
Michelle, that is kind of my story
Yeah, that's
because
cute.
I started out in this life with just a determination to serve God. I got saved as a little girl and I was very eager to find out what God wanted to do with my life. I grew up in the 70s and 80s after the women's lib movement, was constantly told, you can be anything, and so I really put a lot of weight in the career that path that I would have, the job that I had, whatever I would hold. So I went and, got a really great education, put a lot of pride in that, started a job. I started as a teacher
Mm,
and was teaching elementary school. And ironically, that was kind of the thing I told God I really didn't want to do, but
yeah,
that's where I ended up.
yeah.
So I was teaching school, and at the same time, I had my own children. It was really hard for me to be a mom and a teacher.
Yes, I relate.
Yeah. So I walked away from teaching and then was really feeling empty and unfulfilled. began to run a dot-com business for a while, wasn't selling anything, so wasn't making any money. I needed to go get another job after a few years of doing that, and pretty much again told God, I'll do whatever you want me to do except sales, because if I could sell, I'd still be running my own company.
Yeah.
And that was the very job he gave me. I got a sales job. So once again, I started doing that and worked my way up the corporate ladder, began making a lot of money, felt very rich and fulfilled that way, and thought this is what I was created for. Was loving that. And then kind of randomly, one Friday afternoon, the company that I was working for was making changes. They were cutting my division. So they fired the 25 reps that worked for me. They fired me, or, they called me up and said, hey, your position doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
And so I was just dumped again.
Yeah.
And it was for me, I mean, it was such a huge loss in my life. And I didn't know where to even begin to rebuild. And
Right.
because it just felt like there was this pattern with God, with every time I did something to the fullest, I would lose it.
Mm,
I struggled with that. And so that was the point where God gave me the story of the little pot. And I wrote my first children's book because he just said, it was him saying to me, Dawn, you need to stop defining yourself by what you hold. I will
mm,
give you things for a season, but when I take them away, that's not who you are. You
yeah.
are my vessel and you can continue to grow fruit. And so I just began to focus, Michelle, on the idea that I'm a vessel that grows the fruit of the Spirit. Like, that's all
Yeah.
I need to do.
Right.
And so I wrote this little story called The Little Pot, which is
Mm,
what I just
so cute.
shared with you. And it got published, it won a lot of awards. So I hadn't really learned my lesson, because now I'm like, I'm an author, and I'm really, really excited about that. And I'm on a book tour. I'm actually visiting a school and sharing with students about what they're going to be when they grow up, and that they should be fruit pots and be vessels that grow the fruit of the Spirit. And while I was doing that, my church that I attended had a little Christian school. And they came to me and they said, Dawn, would you be willing to come and be the principal? We need a new principal.
Wow. That's a big job.
Yeah. And I was like, no, like, I'm an author now. That's what I
Right.
want to do. And absolutely not. And
Right.
so, but as I was sharing with kids that they needed to be open to whatever God put in them and
Yeah.
not define themselves, I'm actually standing in a school library and I'm speaking to the students and asking them what they want to be when they grow up. And then at the end of the talk, I go back and say, so it doesn't really matter if you're going to be a princess or a football player or a policeman, but that you be a fruit pot. And so when I got to that part of my talk that day, I couldn't remember all the things the kids had said that they wanted to be. So I started pointing to people around the room, and there was a principal in the room. And I said, or you could be a school principal. And as I said it, the Holy Spirit was just in my head going, but you won't. And I'm
Uh,
like, oh no, like, really, Lord, that's where you want me to be? And so I finally said yes. And I became the principal of this school. And in that, I started helping, working directly with the students in the school about growing the fruit of the Spirit. In that process, I began to see that kids were missing it a little bit because they thought they possessed the fruit
mm,
versus giving it away. And so we wrote another book about a
nice.
second vessel that's called the teapot. And in this book, Little Pot meets this vessel, and Teapot does not want to give his tea away.
Mm,
And so it's all about pouring into others. And he convinces Little Pot that Little Pot should keep the strawberries it grows, right? Well, you can't grow strawberries and keep them. You can't grow
right.
more, right? So this is a whole story about forgiveness and about giving away what God does in your life. So it's
Mm,
also
so
about
beautiful.
holding on to things too tightly, but we don't have patience. We show it. Tomorrow we have to do it again. And I think
Right.
at least for me, I was always a person that wanted to achieve something and be there, right?
Right.
I've reached that
Yeah.
level and now I'm there. I've
Yep.
taken patience
Not a lie.
101 and I've got it. But the next situation is even more, God is just continually growing us. So we wrote the second book with the students while I was a principal.
Oh,
And then we began to say, okay, we want them to do more than just pour into others. Like showing love, joy, and peace, being kind to others is where it's at. But at some point, we need to go beyond that
yeah.
and tell others our God story. Be
Hmm.
brave enough, and that's what it is to shine.
Mm.
So we wrote a third book called The Oil Lamp,
So
which
cute.
is about a little vessel that carries the potter's light. It's light, it can't light itself, only the potter
Yeah.
can light it. But it's too afraid and it hides under bowls all the time, like the Bible tells us not to
Yeah.
hide our light. And so after I wrote that book, I had an opportunity to go to Israel.
Wow.
I traveled to Israel and told an antique dealer I'd like to buy a little oil lamp. So this is the oil lamp,
Cute.
and you can see how small it is. It fits in the palm of your hand. So it was literally like an ancient flashlight.
I imagined them so much bigger, like in
I
the
know,
Bible.
me too. I thought they would be like,
Yeah.
the oil lamps of our time that would light
Right.
up a room, but they were very small. And so when I went to the antique dealer and I asked them for an oil lamp, he asked me if I wanted this set. And I was like, you get two of them? And he said, no, every oil lamp came with a small jar
Oh,
that would fit right in the top. So when it cracked, oil could seep through to the
wow.
lamp and it would keep burning. So I said, sure, I'll take the set.
Yeah.
I bought the set and I came home. And at the end of the story of the oil lamp, when it becomes brave enough to shine, the potter puts it up on a pedestal so it can shine for all the.
Mm.
Um, and so at this point, we're teaching students about telling others about Jesus, shining
Right.
their light. So that was really what God was doing in my life at that time. He's like, okay, you're a principal, but how willing are you to talk about me? That's a big step. So I began to do that and was getting braver and braver and just loving my job,
Yep.
loving what I was doing. And 2020 came.
Yep.
And just a couple years before that, my church had gone through some big trials where the pastor had resigned over an affair and it was very messy. And so there was a lot of stuff that had happened with my friend group and different things that had just kind of scarred me, but I kept going. But then we hit 2020 and they just determined they were going to close the school altogether.
Wow.
So I'm losing my job. Now, been there, done that, right? I knew enough not to hold on to it tightly. I knew that God was going to give me something new. And that's when we moved to Raleigh. And at that point in my life, it's COVID. I don't know anybody. We don't have a church.
Wow.
My own children have grown up and moved away. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm thinking, I just don't have anything. I don't know. I
Yeah.
know God has a plan, but I'm really feeling empty now. And that's when God said, you remember that small jar?
Mm.
That's like you've been to the point where you were oil lamp and you're feeling burnout because you're up in leadership on a pedestal. And now you can be that small jar. So we put together another book still.
Wow.
And this one was about, we ask God all the time to heal our wounds, right? Fix our cracks, and God doesn't. And that's a lot of times because he needs the crack to refuel somebody else. And
Mm.
so, as I spent a lot of time with the Lord since 2020, kind of healing over the pain and the things that I'd gone through with different stuff, I began to see how those can help others. And I now run a little publishing company where I help people publish
Great.
stories. But yeah, so that's kind of my life, how
Your God
it's
story.
yeah, my God
What I
story.
Yeah, there's so many things that I love. I love how all of your life circumstances led you to your books. Like, okay, this happened and then I wrote about this. It was like God was like, I got to take you here so that you write this book so that this message gets out. And it's so beautiful to see that, and that you were just willing to go wherever, and sometimes you had no choice. But through that, God led you to other things. And my favorite thing that you said is stop defining yourself by what you hold when you were talking about one of the books. And I thought that was specifically, it speaks to me and the widowed community, because when we lose our husband, we feel like that was our title. Like
Mhm.
we're not married anymore. And in an instant, you are just feel like you don't know who you are anymore. Because I was like, I am not a wife anymore. Who am I? I'd been a wife for 17 years. And
Yeah.
so that really speaks to me. And for everyone listening who's rebuilding their life, whether they're widowed, divorced, whatever's going on in their life, like stop defining yourself by what you hold. I think that could speak to all of us, that we don't need to have a title define us. And I know I've been there many times in my life with different businesses and things I'm trying to achieve. And if I do this, then I'm this and I'm this. But no, like we don't need to define ourselves by what we hold. Like that was so brilliant. Is that something you feel like a message God gave you?
Oh, yeah. That's because it's exactly what I did. I think we hold on to things, and even identity is so wrapped up into everything we are, right? And so
Yeah.
we just constantly keep, even when I thought I had learned the lesson, I would go back and find myself doing it again.
Right.
So it wasn't that God could take away something, He could dump me from one thing and I learned that lesson. Because immediately when I got something new, I did this, the pattern repeated. So it was just, I mean, everything we just need to be loose with, our theology we need to hold on loosely because He changes that. He just, I think we all learned that a little bit through COVID because we were forced to make some changes that we didn't expect. But yeah, I know. And you mentioned that it all kind of led to me writing books, and being an illustrator and making up stories was the one thing I was really good at as a child. And so it was like something I always wanted to do. Even when I first started teaching school, I was writing books for my students
I love it.
and dreaming of becoming an author. But God's path to get me there was so different than what I ever imagined it would be. So He hears us and He gives us desires and He fulfills them, but boy, they just look very different.
Right. I was about to ask you, it's one of my questions. I was about to say, who illustrates it? So you do
No,
both.
I do. I do. Yes, I illustrate the books. Yes.
Is amazing.
So I kind of started, I feel like I tell people I started really more as an illustrator because, like, when I was a teacher, other people would write books and I would put pictures with them for them. So I love the illustration part. I love to tell stories. And I think that's why I write children's books instead of adult books.
Hmm.
I really feel like my books are more for adults
Yeah,
than
it
they
sounds like
are for
both.
kids. But I think that pictures tell great stories. So
Yes, they do.
I'm
When
in love with picture books. Yeah.
Yeah, I love them. Have you ever read the book Tear Soup? It's
I
very
have
good. Like it's
not.
written like it's for kids, but it's really for adults. It's a grief book. Anyways, that's one that kind of reminds me of that, where it's really like it's for adults.
Yeah.
But it uses these pictures to illustrate like grieving and the tears in the soup. And anyways, that's a beautiful one that it reminds me of. And I feel like there's not enough Christian, good lesson books like for kids. Like there's so many secular ones. There's ones that are, introducing concepts that we don't, agree with. So it's so nice to have books that have good lessons. I know I definitely want to get them. I don't have a lot of little kids in my life, but I do have two great nieces. I mean, sorry, nephews who are 2 and 3. So I'm like, this will be a great thing that I'd love to get them. And it's exciting just to see what you've done with this. So let's talk about the rebuilding portion, since really what this podcast is like. Let's talk about one of the times, anytime you want.
Okay.
You lost the job, you lost, or God calls you to be a principal. Like, how did you? I think it applies more to like losing something. So
Hmm.
how did you? Let's talk about maybe the COVID one. You lost your job, you had no choice. Like, how did you figure out how to rebuild your career and decide what you wanted to do? Like, what were there steps that helped you? Were there people? I know it's kind of a big
Um,
question.
say each time there were different situations that God
Yeah.
brought into my life to lead me to the next thing. And I don't feel like I had a lot of control over
Yeah.
what He was doing. He definitely didn't give me what I thought I needed, right?
Hmm.
I'm really good at telling God how to do His job.
Right?
And
I think we all are. Like, this is
And
what
it's
I need.
probably I know it's a good thing he's not listening to me and doing it. But when it comes to your own life, we all want God to kind of follow our path, right? So he never gave me that opportunity. I mean, even and when we're talking about the COVID situation, when the school had closed, I will say I had grown enough to look at that situation when it came with very positively. But I continually was going back and grabbing where I was comfortable.
Yeah.
So I kept interviewing for other schools, for other
Okay.
principal jobs. And I clearly heard from God, that's not where you're going to be. I don't want you to do that anymore. In fact, I'll even go as far as to say he was pretty clear with me when I first finally said yes to become the principal, that I believe that he was saying, this is for a season. When you finish, you're going to get to be that author. Like,
Okay.
do this for me.
Yeah.
But even then, I thought, well, this should be what I should be doing for the Lord.
Hmm.
But that's not easy. You know, writing books or going into business for yourself and trying to make a
Yeah.
living at publishing,
Yep.
that's not
Oh,
easy.
yeah.
Like, it's so much easier just, I mean, being a principal is super hard, but you get a paycheck,
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
insurance, right?
It's
You're
different as an
safe.
entrepreneur. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I kept thinking, even over those years where I was like starting to start this business on the side and go into writing my books full time, I'd find myself drifting off in the middle of the day looking at job opportunities or schools that were hiring. I'm going to apply here. I'm going to do this. And I would do it. Those doors would close. I'd go on an interview and come back and feel defeated.
Hmm.
So everything that Michelle, that I was doing to get through it in my own power wasn't getting me through it. The stuff God was doing, I didn't have a church family at that time. So I was doing a lot of
Right.
Bible studies at home or online, or calling up my daughters and saying, hey, would you do this Bible study with me? And we would do it together. And so some of the Bible studies that I did at that time really spoke to me, really helped me get to the next level,
Hmm.
heal from the wounds that I'd had from the dumping and, the loss that I'd faced from the past. And so, I mean, if you want me to name one, there was one, the Priscilla Shire Bible study about Elijah.
Yeah.
Have
Is
you
it
done
called
that
Elijah?
one?
I think
Yes,
so.
I think so. I think it's called Elijah. I know I did it like right after I moved here, but it was when you just heard my life story. Like Elijah goes through everything I went
Yeah.
through, you know? And so that was so key in helping me move on to the next stage and to embrace where I was and what was giving me at that point.
Hmm.
I think I had been emptied enough by God that at that point I just was like, don't give me anything else.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just going to sit here and be depressed
Right.
because I don't
Right.
know. I don't want to get anything because I know eventually I'm going to lose it. And so I think there was some of that healing that he needed to do with like, no, I still want you to hold things. I
Right.
just want you to be willing to let go of them and not make them who you are.
Right. I think there's a
So,
temptation to when we've lost things to then, yeah, I don't want to hold on to it. I don't want to lose again. I see that a lot with widows and widowers who, with dating again and things like that. Like, I don't want to go down that path because I don't want to be widowed again. I actually had that. So I'm married again 3 years. And when Joel and I, my current husband, started dating, I remember the weekend we got engaged and I was flying home and I all of a sudden had this thought, I could be widowed again. I can't do this. I can't do this. And like started going down that path. And it was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm going to live life again. I'm not going to live in fear. And so I think we can do that with anything, whether it's a new relationship or a new job or a new, whatever it is, that we can be scared to walk into that because we don't know what the future, especially when we've lost things and we're like, no, I'm not doing this again, but taking those things and just being like, holding everything loosely like it's yours, God. Like, I
yeah,
have no control. I've tried to
so
have
true.
control. I have no control about my future and what's going to happen, but really being present in the moment while I'm here, while I have this is a gift. I'm going to enjoy it. I'd love to hear a little bit more about several things about your job as a principal. I have a good friend who's a principal, and I'm like, that just seems like such a hard job. How long did you do that?
10 years.
10 years. Wow.
10 years. Yeah.
And did you like it better than being a teacher, or is it just different? How does it compare for you?
It was very different.
Yeah.
I did like it better than being a teacher, but when I was a teacher, I loved that more than anything.
Right.
I can't say I liked it more, but it was just a very different time of my life. And it was a small school, so we were very much a family. And it was, I will say, my business experience, I think, prepared me more for a principalship than my education experience, than my
Interesting.
teaching experience,
Yeah.
because it was a private school and I was essentially running a business. But it was definitely a long job. I feel like, during the day I was working with children the whole time. And then the children would leave and I'd be working with teachers.
Right.
And
It's a
then
big job.
finally, when the teachers would leave, I'd have a couple hours before I would go home to do my own stuff. And so I would get home and then it would start all over again the next
Right.
day. And so it was really, working long, long hours. Because we were a part of a church, I was also considered church staff. And so I did a lot of ministry through it. We did a lot of parenting classes and Bible studies with the parents of the students. And so that was just really rewarding to see the growth in the parents as well as the
Hmm.
students. And so I never thought I would enjoy it as much as I did. It's one of those things where God knows you
Right.
better than you know yourself.
Right.
But I did. I loved it and I learned so much in that. I got my master's as I was doing it and
Right.
built the school. We wrote our own curriculum. So
Amazing.
yeah, it was a great time. Just,
Yeah.
I
You
have
learned so much.
huge, great memories from it.
Right. So you then, and we were done with that, you wrote another book and then you started a publishing company. I would love
Yeah.
to know more about that. How did that happen? What are you currently doing with that? I think that's amazing.
Yeah, so I didn't really start the publishing company.
Okay.
I'm taking it over from another girl who
Okay.
started it. She actually started it the year that I went to be a principal. So as I was done being a principal and was trying to figure out how am I going to make a living at being an author, because you don't make
Right.
any money when
No.
writing and selling books.
Nighty.
And so I kept asking God, if this is what you want for me, you need to provide a way. Like, I don't understand how I'm going to be able to afford this and not have a job. And so
Right.
I joined a group of Christian women authors and speakers.
Cool.
It's called AWSA, AWSA. They're
Right.
wonderful.
Is that advanced writers?
Advanced Writers and Speakers
I
Association.
just joined that. Like just joined. I got the email yesterday or something. Like I went to Tennessee. I met them at this big conference. Anyways, so I'm part of that. I just joined. So yay.
Okay. Well, we're
We'll probably
AWSA
see each
sisters
other
then.
on stuff. Yes. And
Yes.
we went
You're going to love
NRB,
that
if you're
group.
familiar with NRB, the National
Yes.
Religious Broadcast. So that's where, and I had a friend who'd been on my podcast, and then she was at that booth. So I got to talking to them, and then I joined. And I put my book in the contest. Anyways, okay, so back to your story.
Yay.
But I was like, wait, I
Okay.
just joined one. What's yours? Okay, go ahead. You joined the same
So,
one I'm part
yes.
of now.
So when I started this full time, I was blogging for like Christian children's authors, met some other people, and I just heard all these authors, women speakers who were talking about ASA. And I was like, that might be something that might give me the connections that I need. So I joined that and I went to their first conference. And I already told you I like to tell God how to do his job.
Yeah.
I went to the conference and told God, okay, I need something here. You need to provide for me. I need to know what the next step is. And of course, I went through the whole conference and nothing. God wasn't, answering my prayers
Yeah.
until the very last evening. I went to dinner and the girl sitting next to me, we started sharing our stories, and her name is Sherry Cowell. And so she began to listen to everything that I was saying, and at the end of the dinner, she said, "Hey, could we meet for breakfast in the morning? I'd like to talk to you about a proposal." And so I met her, and she said, "Hey, my publishing company that I've started, I really want an exit plan. I want to
Wow.
find somebody who can take it over when I'm
Wow.
done in a few years. Would you be?" And I was like, "Oh no!" Like okay, God, I asked for
Yeah.
something, but I'm not
Yeah.
running to run a publishing company. And she just said, I, with your experience, I feel like you'd be really good at this. And I said, well, I'll work for you for a while. I'll say yes for now. And so over the last couple years, I've been running the publishing company and doing things. And
Wow.
this is the year. So she's stepping back and we're moving the company under my little book company.
That's awesome.
And we publish about 30 to 40, maybe 50 books a year of all different types: children's books, memoirs, nonfiction, fiction, Bible
That's
studies.
awesome.
A lot of also women come to us, but it's basically a self-publishing service where we do the work for them so they can be self-published.
That's
But
great. What is the company name?
it's called EA Books Publishing. EA stands for Erica, comma Adonai. I love you, Lord.
Okay.
So yeah, it's EA Books Publishing.
Okay, perfect. We could probably put a link to that in case someone's
Yeah,
interested in like,
absolutely.
okay, I don't know what to
Absolutely.
do. I have taught myself. I have self-published like 5 books and it's a big learning process. So
It
for those
is.
of us
It,
who don't
it
want to do
is.
that, I mean, I've taught myself, but a lot of people are like, I don't know how to do all that.
Right.
It's nice that you have something that can do that for the people that are like, I don't want to do that. So that's fun. So you get to work with authors and you get to, write your own books. Do you have plans for any more books right now?
I do. We're currently illustrating the fifth one in the
Yay.
series, which goes back to Teapot's story, but it's about Teapot calls the kettle black.
Uh-huh.
And so the potter decides one morning that he doesn't want to drink tea and he begins to make coffee in a black kettle. And Teapot gets very jealous. And so it's really about it's I feel like God is saying we need something that's helping kids accept our differences.
Mhm.
You
That's
know, we live in a time where we just think everybody should think like we do, and if they don't, they're wrong. And
mhm.
so I'm trying to get the message across in this story that we're all a little different, and that's good, and that our differences are needed in the world by God, and so how we work together as a family.
That's
So
good.
yeah, so that one should be out this year. I just have the illustration takes me a while when
Well,
I'm doing all
sure.
this other stuff. But it's written and edited and ready to go. I just have to finish up some illustrations and we'll be releasing that one. So it's called The Black Kettle. And so yeah, so I'm still playing with the vessels and the potter. That will always be something. I'd love to see some animation with them someday.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
But we'll see if that's God's plan. I love
Yes.
helping authors right now, and so I spend a lot of time coaching them and
Yeah,
doing that with, even if they don't publish with EA, I have a lot of opportunities to speak at writers' conferences and
great.
women's retreats and church conferences and things like that. So I just
I love that.
love to do that.
Would you happen to be at the conference this summer? I'm thinking about going.
I've been discussing that. I had my awesome mastermind this morning. We were all talking about it. Right before that conference is the a conference for Speak Up. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a lot of
No.
awesome women go to Speak Up. Carol Kent runs that conference, and am at that conference. So I'm just trying to decide if I want to do another one right after that.
Right.
I have done the ASA conference the last 3 years, and it's been such a blessing. Yes, I recommend you go.
Yes, and I entered my books.
There you
So
go. So
I
yeah,
was like, they're like, you can just leave it with us, and like, so I paid for everything there and entered, and then yeah, became
awesome.
part of ASA. I'm also part of SEPA, Christianity
Yes,
Publisher. Yeah, so that's who I went to
Susan.
NRB with. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yes.
which was great.
Susan Neal. She's
Yeah,
an awesome person and she's
yeah.
amazing.
I've heard there's both. I mean, I guess I'll be both too, because
Yes.
there's
Yes.
good things in both of them. And so it
Yeah.
was. I really enjoyed getting to know other authors there. I mean, have you been to NRB before?
I
It's
have.
interesting.
I didn't go in 2025, but I went in 2024 and
Yeah.
did several podcast interviews and things. With
Yes.
taking
So
on
cool.
EA books this year, I just couldn't manage the
Yeah,
time.
it's a lot.
So I was
Yeah,
actually
it was.
booked and then I called him and said, I'm not going to be able to make it. But Yeah.
Yes, it was a great experience. I absolutely loved it. So I took it was really with my book Widow Goals: Steps to Finding Peace When You Lose Your Spouse, but I ended up talking more about my ministry, Widow Goals, my nonprofit, and we do retreats and events and things like that. And I ended up giving out 40 of my books and connecting with widows, and like it was just such an amazing,
Wow.
and also to sharing my podcast, and it was just connecting, with other Christians, and it was fabulous. So I loved it. So to wrap it up, and I didn't give you any warning of any questions. So um, thinking about any of your rebuilding times, what advice would you give to someone who they've just had a big loss, whatever that is? Could it be a job, a death, or anything, divorce? They're looking at like, how do I rebuild? What advice? And this is very broad, but any advice is good. What advice would you give to them when they're just like feeling overwhelmed, like I have to rebuild?
It sounds so cliche, but I think we all need to be reminded to trust that
Yes.
God has a big plan,
Yep. So good.
because I think it's just so easy to feel like he didn't know what he was doing, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Like I don't know what's happening. And so when
Yep.
we feel lost, we feel like God didn't have a plan, or it didn't work out, or maybe we know deep down that he does, but it's just taking too long maybe to for him to bring it about. That's usually me. It goes back to that patience
Yeah.
thing. We have a thing that we do with the kids when we talked about becoming a fruit pot, or what we can we do today to produce the fruit. And we call them FBOs. So they're fruit bearing opportunities. And so even today, like when my daughters call me and they're having a crisis or a loss of something in their life, they know they're going to hear from me. Well, there's an FBO. This is an
Love
opportunity
that.
to show patience or love or joy or peace. And so if we could wake up every day
Yeah.
believing that God created me for this moment, for this terrible situation, and this is my fruit bearing opportunity, and what can I do to produce love, joy, peace, self control, patience, kindness through
I love
it
that.
until we get to the next thing. Because again,
Yeah.
it's going to be picked. You're not
Yeah.
going to like produce patience and have it. You're going to show it and tomorrow, but there's reward in that alone. When I began to just define myself as a vessel that would grow the fruit that the potter wants to produce, I saw that as a small victory. Like, well, hey, I was patient today, right? Like I didn't
Right.
lose it. So I think those are miracles. We look for God to do miracles, but when we're feeling joy in a really bad situation, that's a miracle.
It is.
That's something that only he can do in his power, when
Right.
he can take our anger and make it peace, and our frustrations and our depression and make it joyful. So,
That's great
I would
advice.
say look to the small little miracles that he does in your life as you wait for the next
That's
thing
so
to come
good.
about.
I love that FBO. So whenever I hear FBO, I think of, I don't know what it actually stands for, but my husband Joel's a pilot, and like the little airport things are called FBOs. So now I'm gonna change that in my head to FBO, fruit bearing opportunity. I'm gonna teach him that. Like that's really good. I love that. Instead of just complaining about what's going on, okay, this is a FBO. What can we learn from this? How can
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
persevere through this? That's great. Well, would it be okay if I prayed for you?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Dear God, I just thank you so much for Dawn. Thank you for connecting us through technology. And I just thank you for the way you have led her through all these losses and helped her rebuild. I thank you for these wonderful, beautiful books that you gave her the ability to create. Thank you for each one and how they came about. Thank you for her publishing company. I just pray big blessings on her company and all that she's doing, that you continue to just guide her into the future as you've already done. I pray that her message gets out to everyone who needs to hear it. God, I pray that we can all look for FBOs, and that we can flip that in our head to when something hard happens, that, okay, it's a fruit bearing opportunity. And I just pray for every listener today who's rebuilding, God, that you would just give them joy today, put something in their life that they're like, okay, God, thank you for that joy, bring them peace and help them to grow closer to you. And I just thank you for this time. Amen. Well,
Amen.
thank you, Dawn. Where can people find you, find your books, social media, whatever you want to share?
So the books are available on Amazon or wherever books are sold, but you'll get the best price at my website, which is
Oh,
dawnstevensbooks.com. So that's DAWNSTEPHENS Books. And you can learn about the publishing there too. I've kind of merged EA Books
Great.
publishing with my website. So if you go to EA Books Publishing or my Dawn Stevens books, you kind of end up at the same place. But
Okay,
yeah,
great.
so that's the best place. I mean, you can find me
Perfect.
on Instagram and TikTok and all those other things, but the
Okay,
website is the
awesome.
best place.
The best place. Well, I will definitely have a link to that in the show notes. So thank you again for being here, and thank you, listeners. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.